the butchers of Kalos Prime. The screams echoing through Kalos Prime's mining tunnels would haunt the galaxy for generations. What started as an ordinary cycle in the rhodium mines had transformed into a nightmare that no amount of diplomatic protocols could wash away. The Vorthak had come like a plague of locusts, their massive warships blotting out the system's twin suns as they descended upon the defenseless colony. Mining Supervisor Kellen watched through the security feeds as the 7-foot-tall reptilian warriors moved through the processing facility with practiced efficiency. The Vorthak didn't just kill. They made art of suffering, broadcasting every moment across the galactic networks as if conducting a masterclass in terror. Their leader, a scarred monster called Warlord Gorthak, had personally executed the colony administrator by slowly peeling away his exoskeleton while keeping him alive with combat stimulants. The message was clear: submit or watch your people become entertainment. 300 light-years away in the galactic Senate chambers, representatives from 73 species argued over tribute calculations. This was the way of things in their enlightened age. Violence was met with negotiation, aggression with appeasement. It had kept the peace for 4 millennia. The Pelorian delegate's tentacles writhed as she spoke through her translator. 15 cargo vessels of processed rhodium should satisfy them. The Vorthak are businessmen at heart. They understand profit. The crystalline form of Ambassador Erix chimed in agreement, his body resonating with harmonic tones that translated to measured words. Historical precedent supports this approach. In the last 17 raids across various systems, tribute has resulted in minimal casualties compared to resistance. The mathematics are undeniable. But in the corner of the vast chamber, Earth's Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in perfect stillness. Her dark eyes never left the main screen where the horror continued to unfold. A Vorthak warrior had just grabbed a Zelathi child, no more than 5 cycles old, and was holding her over a mining shaft while her parents begged. Sarah's fingers traced over a small device on her wrist, entering a code she had hoped never to use. The Senate speaker, an ancient Altrurian whose species had founded the galactic government, noticed her movement. Ambassador Chen, Earth has maintained observer status in these proceedings. Does humanity wish to contribute to the tribute? Sarah stood slowly, her movement drawing every eye in the chamber. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for 43 years, known primarily for their engineering innovations and cultural contributions. They built beautiful stations, composed moving symphonies, and seemed eager to learn from older civilizations. They appeared soft, almost naive in their enthusiasm for peace. Madam Speaker, Sarah's voice carried across the chamber with unexpected authority. Earth requires 12 hours to formulate our response. The Pelorian delegate's tentacles flared in agitation. 12 hours? The Vorthak are executing colonists every 30 minutes. That's 24 more dead while Earth deliberates. Sarah's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in her eyes, something that made even the predator species in the room unconsciously lean back. Then I suggest you begin preparing your tribute immediately. Earth will act according to our principles. She turned and walked from the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Behind her, confused murmurs rippled through the assembly. What principles could possibly matter more than saving lives? On Earth, in a facility buried beneath the Antarctic ice, alarms that hadn't sounded in 30 years began their urgent call. Men and women who had trained their entire lives for a moment they hoped would never come started moving with practiced precision. They were the guardians of humanity's most terrible secret, that beneath their smiles and art and eager friendliness, humans remained the apex predators who had clawed their way to the top of their world's food chain through millions of years of savage evolution. Admiral Marcus Stone read the authorization codes 3 times. His weathered face, marked by scars from conflicts the galaxy didn't know about, remained impassive. Around him, his staff waited in tense silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said finally, "Operation Nemesis is authorized. We're going to remind the galaxy why Earth doesn't negotiate with terrorists." The word terrorist didn't translate into galactic common. The closest approximation was fear merchant, but even that failed to capture the visceral hatred humans held for those who targeted innocents. It was a lesson written in blood across human history, from Munich to Moscow, from New York to New Mumbai. Every time humanity had paid a ransom, every time they had negotiated with those who used civilian deaths as leverage, the violence had only grown worse. Lieutenant Commander Maya Patel stood before her unit, 48 of the deadliest humans ever trained. They wore armor that bent light around it, making them shadows within shadows. Their weapons were silent, efficient things that killed without drama or spectacle. "Remember," she said, her voice carrying the weight of history, "we're not just saving lives today. We're establishing doctrine. Every hostile dies, every hostage lives. No exceptions, no negotiations, no mercy for those who prey on the innocent." Back in the Senate chambers, Sarah had returned to face an increasingly agitated assembly. The tribute had been gathered: 20 vessels of rhodium, advanced mining equipment, and navigational charts to other resource-rich systems. It was a king's ransom, but it would save lives. Or so they believed. "Ambassador Chen," the speaker's voice held a note of desperation, "surely Earth sees the wisdom in our approach? The Vorthak have accepted tributes before. They're brutal but rational." Sarah activated her holographic display, showing images from Earth's history that made even the warrior species flinch. Cities in ruins, children's bodies in streets, the aftermath of attacks where ideology and greed had worn the mask of political violence. "Respectfully, Madame Speaker, you're wrong. The Vorthak aren't rational. They're addicts, and violence is their drug. Every tribute you pay doesn't satiate them. It just finances their next fix." The Altrurian's feathers ruffled in distress. "But what alternative is there? They have thousands of hostages." Sarah's smile was sad and terrible. "You watch and learn. Why Earth spent the last 30 years building ships you thought were cargo haulers. 3 vessels broke orbit from Earth's moon, where they had been hidden in plain sight among civilian traffic. As their stealth systems disengaged, the galaxy got its first look at what humans called problem solvers. They were not the elegant, flowing designs of other species' warships. They were angular, brutal things that looked like weapons themselves. Their names were painted in human script: resolution, reckoning, and retribution. On Kalos Prime, Warlord Gorthak received word of the approaching human vessels. He laughed, a sound like grinding stone. 3 ships? The humans send 3 ships against our fleet of 40? He turned to his lieutenant, a scarred veteran of countless raids. "These humans amuse me. When we're done here, perhaps we'll visit their Earth next." His lieutenant, however, felt unease creeping up his spine. The humans' ships were small, yes, but they moved wrong. They didn't approach in standard attack formation or defensive positions. They moved like pack hunters, constantly shifting, never presenting a stable target, always maintaining overlapping fields of fire. The human vessels took position around Kalos Prime and then did something unprecedented. They began broadcasting, not to the Vorthak, but to the hostages. The message was simple, repeating in every language of every species held captive. "Close your eyes. Cover your ears. Count to 1,000. Freedom is coming." Gorthak snarled at the transmission. Empty words from a weak species. He grabbed another hostage, a Tyrellian engineer, and prepared to execute him on camera. Let them watch their failure. But in the ventilation systems of the mining facility, in the maintenance corridors, in every shadow and forgotten corner, things were already moving. The humans hadn't just sent ships. They had sent their ghosts, their demons. The children of their violent past reformed into instruments of precise justice. Sergeant Alex Cooper moved through the darkness like death itself. His team of 12 had infiltrated the facility 6 hours ago, while the galaxy had been debating tribute. They had mapped every Vorthak position, tagged every hostage, identified every kill zone. This wasn't going to be a battle. It was going to be surgery, and the cancer was about to be removed. The lights in the mining facility suddenly died. Emergency power failed simultaneously. In the absolute darkness that followed, infrared lasers began painting targets that only human eyes enhanced by technology could see. Gorthak roared in anger, demanding his warriors restore power. That's when the whispers started. Soft voices in the darkness speaking in perfect Vorthak. "You should have stayed away. You should have never touched the innocent. Now you learn why humans don't negotiate. The first Vorthak died without ever seeing his killer. Then the second, then the third. By the time Gorthak realized they were under attack, 40 of his warriors had already fallen. But this was only the beginning of humanity's lesson to the galaxy. The law of no quarter. The darkness inside Kalos Prime had become a living thing, filled with whispers of death and the soft sounds of bodies hitting the ground. Warlord Gorthak's enhanced vision, superior to most species in the galaxy, meant nothing in this artificial midnight. The humans had done something to the very air itself, releasing particles that absorbed every wavelength of electromagnetic radiation. Even the Vorthak's natural heat vision was useless. Form defensive circles, Gorthak bellowed in his native tongue. Protect the hostages! It wasn't mercy that motivated him. The hostages were his only leverage, his shields against whatever demons the humans had unleashed. But his orders came too late. The humans had already separated his forces, using sonic disruptors that created walls of sound, herding the Vorthak like sheep, while leaving corridors clear for the hostages. Lieutenant Commander Maya Patel watched through her tactical display as her teams executed the plan with surgical precision. Each soldier's position was marked, each Vorthak tagged, each hostage tracked. Alpha Team, you have 6 hostiles moving toward Mining Shaft 3. Beta Team, intercept. Gamma, begin extraction of hostages in Processing Room 7. The confirmations came back in whispers, professional and cold. This wasn't her soldiers' first operation, though it was their first against an alien force. They had trained for this in Somalia and Afghanistan, in a dozen conflicts the galaxy didn't know about because humanity had learned to keep its violence in the shadows. In the Senate chambers, absolute silence reigned as the representatives watched the tactical feeds the humans were broadcasting. Not the gruesome spectacle the Vorthak had shared, but clinical efficiency. Green dots representing humans moved through the facility like a flood, while red dots representing Vorthak vanished one by one. Blue dots, the hostages, streamed toward extraction points in perfect order. How? The Pelorian delegate's translation carried disbelief. The Vorthak are warriors. They've conquered entire systems. Sarah Chen stood at the center of the chamber, her hands clasped behind her back. The Vorthak are bullies. They've never fought someone who fights back with intelligence instead of rage, someone who turns violence into a science. The ancient Altrurian speaker leaned forward, her aged eyes studying the human ambassador with new understanding. Your species. You've done this before. More times than we care to remember, Sarah admitted. We've had thousands of years to perfect the art of killing those who harm innocents. We just hoped we'd left that knowledge in our past. Back on Kalos Prime, Gorthak had managed to gather 30 of his remaining warriors in the main processing chamber. They had 200 hostages pressed against the walls, weapons trained on them. It was a standoff, or so he thought. Humans, he roared into the darkness. Show yourselves. Face us with honor. The response came from everywhere and nowhere. A voice that seemed to emerge from the walls themselves. Honor? You want to talk about honor while hiding behind children? It was Admiral Stone speaking from the Resolution in orbit. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but it carried an edge that made even Gorthak's warriors shift nervously. You mistake us for the others, Stone continued. The ones who pay you to go away, who treat you like a natural disaster to be endured. We see you for what you are, a disease, and humanity has become very good at curing diseases. Gorthak snarled, pressing his weapon against a young Zelathi's head. I'll kill them all. Every last one. No, Stone said simply. You won't. The ceiling above the Vorthak suddenly erupted in brilliant light, thousands of microdrones deploying flares that were calibrated specifically to overwhelm Vorthak retinal cells, while leaving other species unaffected. In that moment of blindness, 48 humans descended from the ceiling on near-invisible cables, their weapons speaking in whispers. Every shot was perfect. Every Vorthak warrior dropped with a single hole through their brainstem, the instant death ensuring they couldn't trigger any final reflexive violence. It took 4 seconds. 4 seconds to eliminate 30 warriors who had terrorized the galaxy for decades. Gorthak, temporarily blinded but still alive, swung his weapon wildly. Where are you? Face me! A figure materialized from the shadows directly in front of him. Sergeant Alex Cooper, his armor's stealth field deactivating to reveal a human face behind a tactical visor. Gorthak towered over him by 2 feet and outweighed him by hundreds of pounds, But it was the Vorthak who took a step back. You want to face someone? Cooper's voice was soft, almost gentle. Drop your weapon. Face me as a warrior. Gorthak laughed, tossing his rifle aside. His claws were each 6 inches long, his muscles designed for tearing through hull plating. You've made a mistake, little human. Cooper removed his helmet and set his rifle down. Several hostages gasped. The human looked almost fragile compared to the massive Vorthak, but there was something in his eyes, something that had been forged in the crucible of humanity's violent evolution. Gorthak lunged with speed that defied his size. Cooper sidestepped, his hand shooting out to strike a specific nerve cluster that human special forces had identified from captured Vorthak corpses. The warlord's left arm went completely numb. Before he could react, Cooper had moved again, striking another point that dropped Gorthak to one knee. You see, Cooper said, circling the wounded warlord, humans didn't become dominant on our planet through strength or speed. We became dominant because we learned to study our enemies, to find their weaknesses, to turn their advantages against them. Gorthak tried to rise, but Cooper struck again, this time at a point that paralyzed the Vorthak's legs. The warlord collapsed, unable to move, able only to watch as Cooper stood over him. You're going to live, Cooper told him. You're going to be the only one of your raiders who does. You're going to go back to whatever hole you crawled out of, and you're going to tell every other would-be raider what happens when you target innocents under human protection. Gorthak's eyes burned with hatred. The Vorthak will return. We will burn your earth. Cooper knelt beside him, speaking so quietly only Gorthak could hear. No, you won't. Because right now there are 12 human strike teams visiting 12 Vorthak bases. Your mates, your offspring, your entire command structure. We're not killing them. We're leaving them alive to spread the word. Humanity doesn't negotiate with terrorists, but we also don't commit genocide. Unless you make us. Don't make us. The extraction of hostages took 6 more hours. Human medical teams treated the wounded. Human counselors comforted the traumatized. Human engineers repaired the damage to life support systems. They moved through the facility with the same efficiency they had shown in combat, but now with gentleness that seemed impossible from the same hands that had just eliminated an entire raiding force. A Torellian child, barely old enough to walk, had been hiding in a supply closet for 3 days. When Private Emma Thompson found her, the child was so terrified she couldn't even cry. Emma removed her armor and sat on the floor, speaking in broken Torellian learned just hours ago from translation programs. Safe now. Bad one's gone. You brave, very brave. The child slowly uncurled and reached out to touch Emma's face as if confirming she was real. Within minutes, she was asleep in the soldier's arms, the first peaceful sleep she'd had since the nightmare began. The galaxy watched all of this. They watched humans switch from ruthless killers to gentle protectors in the span of a heartbeat. They watched the same hands that had ended lives with precision now tenderly care for the wounded. It was a duality that no other species possessed to such an extreme degree. In the Senate chambers, the silence stretched for long minutes after the last Vorthak had fallen. Finally, the Altrurian speaker stood, her ancient voice carrying the weight of history. We have witnessed something today that will be remembered for millennia. Earth has shown us that there is another way. Not the way of tribute and appeasement, but the way of absolute protection for the innocent. The Orcs ambassador's crystalline form resonated with concern. But such violence, how can this be called civilized? Sarah Chen turned to face the assembly. Because violence in defense of the innocent is not the same as violence for profit or pleasure. The Vorthak killed because they enjoyed it. We killed to stop them. That distinction matters, and if others come, the Pelorian delegate asked. If other raiders test this new doctrine, then they'll learn the same lesson, Sarah said simply. Earth doesn't negotiate with those who target civilians. We end them, quickly, efficiently, and without hesitation. But we also rebuild. We heal. We protect. She gestured to the screens showing human ships already delivering supplies to Kalos Prime. Human engineers working alongside local workers to repair the damage. Human teachers setting up temporary schools for the children who had lost everything. This is humanity's offer to the galaxy, Sarah announced. Accept us as protectors, and we will stand between you and any who would harm the innocent. We will be the wall that raiders break against, the shadow that makes predators flee. But know this, we will never ever negotiate with terrorists. 3 months later, the galaxy had changed. The Vorthak had retreated to their home systems and hadn't been seen since. Warlord Gorthak, true to Cooper's prediction, had spread the word of humanity's response. Other raiding groups who had operated, for centuries with impunity, suddenly found themselves reconsidering their career choices. The human doctrine spread throughout known space. No negotiations, no tribute, no mercy for those who harm innocents. It was simple, brutal, and effective. For the first time in 4 millennia, civilian casualties from raids dropped to 0. But perhaps the most profound change was in how the galaxy saw humanity. They were no longer just the eager newcomers with their art and music. They were the guardians who stood in the dark, the protectors who had turned their violent past into a shield for others. On Earth, Admiral Stone stood in his office looking at a report of the latest shipping routes, all secure, all protected by the mere threat of human response. He allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had spent so long trying to overcome its violent nature, but perhaps that nature had a purpose after all. His aide entered with a new report. "Sir, the Galactic Senate is formally requesting Earth to head the new Civilian Protection Force." Stone nodded. "Except with conditions. We train all species in our methods. We share our technology. But the doctrine remains absolute. No negotiations with those who target innocents." As the aide left, Stone turned back to his window, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, children of a dozen species were sleeping peacefully, knowing that humanity's demons had become their guardian angels. It was a good trade, he thought. A violent past redeemed by a protective future. The galaxy had learned why humans didn't negotiate with killers. More importantly, they had learned why they were grateful for it.